Hi, Matt Shrux here from the Jackson Kayak Fishing Team, Torqeedo Pro staff, and founder of theplastichull.net. Today I'll be going over reconfiguring the steering on the Big Rig. Since I installed the Torqeedo 2 seasons ago, there's been a bunch of different ideas I've had for upgrading the steering, and this is just another option that I've come up with actually about a season ago, and I'd like to basically bring it all together. So what I have here is a brand new rudder cable and tubing kits from Jackson Kayak. I won't be using the big tubing, but I will be using the smaller line since initially I had cut it to reposition where the steering cable came out of the stern of the kayak. So I'm gonna have to cut off all the cable I have on here and reinstall it. So I got a brand new cable pack here, and basically I'm gonna run you through how to do it. This setup should be the final setup for the steering with the Torqeedo on this particular Jackson Kayak model, the Big Rig. Thank you. Okay, now as you see here, this is the initial install of the Torqeedo that I did 2 seasons ago. The steering cables from the factory come out in this area here, but I had moved them to come out of this area here because I wanted the steering to be on the top, because I honestly didn't come up with the idea, or I hadn't seen any other installs, but I've seen guys that have been installing the steering bracket down here on the bottom side, and then taking this stop clamp and putting it on the top. What this will do is allow me to keep the stock steering cables to the bottom, and that'll allow me to turn the motor without it trying to pull the motor up. This was sort of a bit of a problem. I mean, it wasn't too bad when the motor is in gear, but besides that, that's the best way to go with the Big Rig. So I'm going to reconfigure that and hang tight. Also, this is a upgrading steering bracket. I went over this on one of my older posts. It's made out of anodized aluminum. This thing will not break, unfortunately, like the stock ones do sometimes, which are made just out of plastic. I definitely recommend this investment. These brackets go for about $100, and the only store that sells them is the kayakfishingstore.com. They manufacture, fabricate, and sell them, but it's the best way to go. Okay, for tools and parts on this job, first of all, you're gonna need a pair of dikes. That's for cable cutting and removing the old cable, shortening up the new cable. Some sort of pliers to crimp the swedges. And then of course, parts, you're gonna need swedges. You're also gonna need, well, for this particular install, since I'm replacing all of the cable, all the tubing and the cable, I'm gonna need the Jackson Kayak tubing kit. That's for the rudder system stock on there. And then I'm gonna need the brand new steering cable to run. So, and then of course, you're gonna need your bike chain oil, which you'll run through the tubing. I'll get to that later. And then on top of that, you'll need some heat shrink tubing with the adhesive inside. I'm gonna remove the old cable, and just by cutting the end off. Slide that out of the Trucourse tow pilot track there. Now, before I remove this tubing, I'm going to take the new tubing, just to make this easier. I'm going to thread the new tubing onto the old cable here. And what this will do is it'll let me feed the cable with the old tubing and the new tubing to the stern of the boat. So basically I'm gonna slide this right into the hole here. Old tubing goes in, new tubing goes in. So I'm gonna continue to push in the new tubing. Now this is instead of trying somehow to reach all the way up here, because it's going to coil down there. with some long object and grab onto it to bring it to the stern. This is very important, this step. But if you're watching this install and you haven't installed the Torqeedo motor yet or a rudder kit, it's going to be a little bit different than this style due to no cabling being installed yet. So I'm almost there. And I'm going to go to the stern of the kayak in a minute here. Okay, so now I'm at the stern of the kayak here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the old tubing, which is right here. I'm going to pull this up, and along with it should come the new tubing. And there it is. There's my connection right there. So now we can just remove that and set the new tubing aside. The old tubing you'll want to slide out of these wire holders. There's some wire holders under here that hold the tubing up to the top deck portion of the kayak. And this is just so that it doesn't snag up with your gear and such. Now, since that's completed, I'm going to remove the cable and tubing from the stern of the boat here. Now, just before I do that, I'm actually going to reuse these carabiners due to that's what connects the motor up to the steering, and this system has worked very well. So I'm just going to cut the cable right off of there. I'm going to save this for future use here. And now, just going to remove this entire piece here. Just cut this right off. That's gone. Now what I'll do with that is I'll fill these holes that I made with Lexel, and those will be sealed perfectly. So now, with the new tube, I want to run this through the wire holders on top here, just so it keeps it out of the way from snagging like it was stock. And now I have to get this end of the tube here through the hole back here. Okay, now the easiest way to get the new tubing to come through the stock hole is by using the new piece of cable. Now what you can do here is slide the new piece of cable into the hole. Now I removed the Lexel I had filling this hole out previously, so actually here's some more of it from the inside. That's how you know that was a good seal there. So now, this is the new cable, this is the new tubing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide the new cable into the tubing, just a bit. And now, pulling the new cable out, that will align the tubing with the actual hole. What you can do is simply just kind of make this like a point. You don't want to cut too much off, but just make it like a little point. This way it'll come through a little easier. All right, I made a point in the end of the tubing here. This way it should line up a little easier. I should be able to get a little bit of the tubing through and then be able to pull it the rest of the way with a pair of pliers. This is really the hardest part of this job. The hole is the same diameter as the tubing is. And I see I got a little piece through there, which is great because now I can get my needle nose on there. Getting there. All right, tubing's through. Okay, now once you have the tubing through, now I'm gonna cut the little point off that I made. Try to cut it as flush as possible. All right, that's good. Now using a pair of needle nose pliers, I have a Torqeedo right here to make it a little faster, and be wind resistant. You want to just crimp a little off the tube and heat that up. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it flange over. See how that happened there? Now what the flange will do is make it so the tubing will fit flush on this hole and it won't pull through. So we'll let that cool down, and then we'll install our cable. Okay, prior to installing the cable, I'm going to use some of this ceramic reinforced bike chain lube. I'm going to put it inside the tubing. This way, it makes a little anti-corrosive agent to it. It's going right down in there. And it'll also help keep the water out. I'm going to put a little bit on the lead end here, and then I'm going to start inserting the cable through. And as I put the cable through, I will let drops of this bike chain oil drip onto the cable itself. This way, the cable is actually kind of impregnated with the bike chain oil. See how that goes right in there like that? This also helps out. It lubes the steering cable so it's nice and smooth moving through the plastic tubing. I do recommend doing this. It'll make the cable last more longer throughout the lifetime of the install in the kayak. But as everything else, it will break eventually, and you'll just have to rerun the cable just like we're doing today. Okay, now we're at the final portion of tying the motor into the steering. As you can see here, I've already switched over the steering bracket. It's now upside down. And so basically I'm gonna need a swedge on here, a piece of heat shrink tubing. Actually, probably put that on first. Swedge. Okay. Now it's going to go onto here. And this just makes it so it creates a quick release. The swedge goes, cable goes through the swedge there. Okay, now we're going to want to, using our pliers, crimp that down. Maybe you can trim off the tag end here. Slide the heat shrink tubing over, and using a heat gun or a lighter, just simply shrink that onto there. Wet your fingers to close it. Else you'll burn yourself. Either wet a little spit off your tongue works. That's it there. Steering. Okay, now we're going to short the cabling up, or I'm sorry, the tubing. So I'm going to bring it out to about here. Should be good enough. And with my leather and scissors, I'm just going to cut around and slide off that piece there. All right, so now the cable is going to go through the top metal piece here. As you can see, it slides right out the bottom, and then under and through a hole there, and then through our cable adjuster here, which should be about halfway. That's it, that's our steering. So now we'll swedge off the ends. Just want to make sure the motor is straight. I'm going to get the Allen keys for these pedals to make sure that they're straight up and down. What I want to do here is I want to shore this up without turning the motor. I'm just going to double check. Motor looks straight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to crimp this down. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm just going to cut this excess off here, and I'm going to do the other side. Just remember, these pins that on the pedals, it keeps them straight up. Doesn't make it guesswork what's straight and what's not.